After months of swirling rumors, the palace finally broke its silence. Catherine is pregnant. Inside the walls of Kensington, a single whispered line shifted everything. The air had been thick with uncertainty for months. Every rare sighting of Kate ignited a frenzy. Speculation, hope, worry. Still, no word. Just silence, heavy and sacred. Then, in a quiet chamber with no cameras, no press officers, only William, Catherine, and a few doctors, the truth surfaced. Charts were studied one last time, words chosen carefully. "You're doing well," one doctor said gently, and then came the moment that stilled time. Due January 2026. The outside world ceased to matter. The room held its breath. William looked at his wife, then turned away as emotion surged. A whisper slipped from his lips, barely audible. "Thank God she's safe." It was the unraveling of everything he'd been holding in. The nights of fear, the brave public face, the weight of a kingdom's expectations. Suddenly it all gave way. His eyes filled. The tears came not from pain now, but gratitude. Kate reached across the table and took his hand. The doctors spoke on, but their voices faded into background noise. In that moment, there was no monarchy, no titles. Just a man and a woman who had faced the unthinkable together. William kissed her forehead. It was quiet, tender, like a man surfacing for air after too long underwater. That touch carried an unspoken vow. Whatever comes next, they're facing it side by side. But their path to that fragile joy was paved in darkness. Before hope, there was heartbreak. In 2024, Catherine's cancer diagnosis changed everything. The palace announcement was brief, but its impact was seismic. She stepped back from public life, and suddenly the royal family's steadiest presence vanished. Behind closed doors, she endured treatment, uncertainty, and pain. Far from the cameras, far from the world's understanding. To many, she remained a portrait of composure. But only those closest knew the depths of her suffering. Now, as a new chapter begins, the shadows haven't disappeared, but they no longer define the story. Behind palace walls, her body waged a quiet, devastating battle. The diagnosis came without warning. Cruel, relentless. It stripped her not just of her public presence, but of that untouchable aura the royals wear like armor. Catherine disappeared from view, and in her absence, the world grew anxious. Where was she? Was it serious? Every day without her smile deepened the unease. The palace kept quiet. But behind those gilded doors, the silence was anything but peaceful. Her treatments were grueling. Her body, once strong, was weakened. Doctors spoke plainly. Another pregnancy was unlikely. The risks were high. Her chances, slim. But for Catherine, motherhood wasn't just obligation. It was her joy, her peace. Losing that possibility cut deeper than anyone knew. William listened in silence, his hands clenched behind his back to hide the shaking. He wore composure like a mask, trained over years of duty. But the pain was real. At public events, he smiled. He waved. But at night, he stared into the distance, toward the hospital where Catherine lay, clinging to hope while quietly battling dread. Then came whispers. Faint, impossible whispers. A pregnancy? Even William didn't believe it at first. He couldn't say the words, afraid that speaking them aloud might break the spell. When doctors confirmed it was real, cautiously, carefully, they begged restraint. Catherine's health was still fragile. So was the child. In those early weeks, they told no one. Not family. Not staff. Just the two of them, living in a fragile bubble of hope and fear, every moment laced with both wonder and worry. Every gentle smile carried a shadow. Every heartbeat, a prayer. But within the quiet halls of Windsor, something rare was unfolding. Catherine returned to her doctors often, each visit another test of faith. The team monitored her constantly. There was no margin for error. And slowly, quietly, the darkness began to lift. Not all at once, but enough to breathe again. And through it all, one tiny heartbeat kept beating. Soft, steady, growing stronger with each day. A whisper of life. A miracle in the making. The steady sound of that heartbeat became their secret tether. A reminder that hope wasn't just a dream, but a truth they clung to. Yet hope came with a price. Catherine's body, already worn by illness, now faced the cruel grip of hyperemesis gravidarum. This wasn't morning sickness. It was all-consuming. Days when she couldn't even stand. Hours when a single scent could break her. Confined to bed, she searched for fragments of comfort, familiar rituals from past pregnancies. Dry brown toast, soft avocados, and the same homemade curry prepared by the kind couple who once cooked for her during George's birth. These weren't just meals. They were lifelines. Small anchors of normalcy in a sea of suffering. But food wasn't enough. She turned inward, toward hypnobirthing. Through steady breaths and whispered mantras, Catherine carved out moments of calm. It wasn't about escaping the pain. It was about taking back control. It became her armor, quiet, invisible, and fiercely unbreakable. So she withdrew from the world. No public outings. No cameras. Just silence behind palace walls. Her world shrank to only a few. Her doctors, her children, William, and a fierce inner resolve. But within that quiet, her strength grew. And then came the question no one dared to ask out loud. If it's a girl, would they name her Diana? When the possibility surfaced, the air in the room seemed to stop. Behind closed doors, doctors gently confirmed what William and Catherine already suspected. The baby was likely a girl. That truth hit deeper than any royal announcement. Because this wasn't just about a child. It was about legacy. William and Catherine didn't speak at first. Just a glance. Knowing, solemn, unshakable. Then Catherine said what had always been unspoken. We know what her name has to be. No debate. No second guessing. Diana. A name waiting in their hearts all along. It wasn't only a tribute, it was a healing act. A way to stitch the past to the future. William said nothing. Just nodded, his eyes misting. But beyond their quiet decision, tension stirred. Not everyone approved. Insiders say Queen Camilla was the first to voice concern. To bring back the name Diana was, in her eyes, to reopen wounds the monarchy had tried to bury. But for William and Catherine, the name wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A reckoning. A quiet revolution. Behind palace walls, the name stirred more than just excitement, it stirred fear. Advisors whispered concerns that it might reopen old wounds, invite relentless comparisons, and shift the spotlight away from Catherine. Some even feared it could fracture the delicate peace the family had worked so hard to restore. But outside those gates, there was no hesitation. When rumors began to swirl, they ignited something rare, hope. Across Britain and beyond, the public responded with warmth and wonder. For many, the name Diana wasn't just a memory. It was a heartbeat, a symbol of love, resilience, and quiet rebellion. The possibility of a child bearing that name felt like more than a tribute. It felt like a promise. Diana Elizabeth Charlotte Windsor, a name that carried not just royal legacy, but deep personal meaning. It honored a grandmother's elegance, a mother's strength, and a nation's affection. For William and Catherine, it became a powerful way to reclaim a narrative once marked by heartbreak and rewrite it with light. Inside their home, the decision brought a shift. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, who had been quietly navigating their own small grief, now had something beautiful to look forward to. George, ever thoughtful, began asking how he could help. Charlotte, with her usual sparkle, insisted the baby be named Sparkle or Butterfly. Names so sweet they made Catherine laugh for the first time in days. And then there was Louis. Too young to grasp the full picture, but wise enough to feel the shift. He drew a crayon portrait of his baby sister and proudly scrawled, "Baby Sister Diana," across the top, taping it to the fridge like a royal announcement. The gloom that had weighed down the household began to lift. The air filled with new energy, giggles in the hallway, tiny feet racing down corridors, and the soft sounds of life returning. William and Catherine gently pulled the children into the preparations, picking out books, nursery colors, and toys together. But it wasn't just about decorating a room. It was about rebuilding a family. The nursery transformed into more than just a space. It became a symbol of healing. Mealtimes grew lighter. Bedtime stories longer. Catherine's fatigue, though still present, no longer seemed so heavy. Their home no longer felt like a fortress of worry, but a sanctuary of joy. And quietly, William and Catherine made a choice. This time, their family would come first. Not protocol, not appearances. Just love. The world outside, the cameras, the whispers, the pressure of the crown, could wait. Inside, they were simply a couple who had weathered a storm. A mother and father holding tightly to a fleeting, precious moment of calm. But beyond their private peace, William sensed another storm brewing, one that would soon come knocking on the gates of the monarchy. Before he's a prince, or a future king, William is simply a dad. No title matters more. Behind the formality, the rituals, and the relentless expectations, his truest role is found in the quiet moments. Reading bedtime stories himself. Doing school drop-offs. Cheering from the sidelines at weekend soccer games. He's never let the crown come between him and his children. Where his ancestors stood at a distance, William leaned in. Where tradition favored duty over tenderness, he chose love. But this new baby felt different. Born after so much silence and struggle, she wasn't just a child, she was a second chance. A quiet kind of healing he didn't know he needed. The moment the doctor said both mother and baby were safe, and she'd be born in January, something inside him broke wide open. He didn't cry as a royal or a husband, but as a father finally allowing himself to feel. His whispered prayer wasn't just gratitude. It was release. Parenting has always been his quiet rebellion. When the world expected him to steel himself for kingship, he softened. When critics dismissed his hands-on approach, he ignored them. Whether it was cleaning the guinea pig cage or kneeling on the nursery floor to hear tiny breaths, he never treated fatherhood as duty, it was his essence. This baby only deepened that truth. The thought of guiding her through life from her very first breath brought a calm he hadn't felt in years. Even as royal demands intensified, he held on to that image. No crown, no cameras, just a father, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by his children. That's why the tears that day came so freely. Because in that moment, everything else fell away. Only love remained. But beyond those nursery walls, destiny was already shifting. As one life prepared to begin, another neared its end. The palace held its breath. While the Wales household brimmed with joy, the air elsewhere turned colder, heavier, thick with whispers. About the king's health. About how long he could carry on. About whether the quiet transition everyone feared was already unfolding behind closed doors. Rumors swirled that his illness wasn't just lingering, it was quietly advancing. Even his most trusted advisors couldn't dispel the growing unease. Time, once plentiful, now felt like it was slipping away. And though nothing had been officially announced, everyone knew where the world's gaze would soon fall. Behind palace doors, whispers of Prince William shifted from heir to imminent successor. Public sentiment echoed that shift. In headlines and polls, it wasn't Charles they clung to, it was William and Catherine. The couple had become the monarchy's center of gravity, not just admired, but expected to lead. What once felt like a distant future was rushing forward fast. For William, the timing was cruel. Just as he prepared to welcome a new baby and find healing in fatherhood, the crown crept closer. The due date, January, landed right inside the window insiders believed could bring seismic change. Balancing new life and national duty felt overwhelming, but there was no room for hesitation. Briefings increased. Schedules changed. State matters once sent to the king were now landing on William's desk. In public, he remained composed, smiling, shaking hands, delivering speeches. But in private, the strain showed. Those closest to him noticed how often his eyes found Catherine, like a quiet reminder of what anchored him. And then, she returned. Not as the fragile woman some had feared, but with a quiet, defiant strength. Catherine's reappearance wasn't dramatic. It was powerful. Her body still bore the marks of illness and pregnancy, but her spirit hadn't dimmed. It had sharpened. While the world assumed she was fading, she had been fighting. Not loudly, but with quiet resolve. She clung fiercely to her role as mother and princess, pouring her limited energy into her children, her recovery, and her royal causes. Every day was a balancing act, yet she never asked, "Can I do this?" She simply did. Together, William and Catherine had become more than future monarchs. They were already the heartbeat of a tired monarchy, symbols of hope, strength, and continuity in a kingdom bracing for change. She didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. She simply showed up. When Princess Catherine appeared at Trooping the Color, the crowd gasped, not because of her outfit or her smile, but because she stood there at all. Against doctors' orders. Against her body's pain. Heavily pregnant and physically fragile, she stood tall, quietly defying everything that had tried to break her. She didn't wave for sympathy. She stood for something deeper, resilience. In that moment, she didn't have to say a word. Her presence alone spoke volumes. Strength, it turned out, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it meant standing upright when every bone begged to give out. And the world noticed. She wasn't just a duchess anymore. Not just a princess. She became something more. Proof that grace could exist even in suffering. Support came flooding in. Letters. Messages. Cheers. A nation saw her anew, as a woman who had weathered storms behind palace walls and still walked forward, not for applause, but for her children, her husband, and herself. A quiet warrior. A modern-day princess who bled, broke, and still rose. And then the news came. It started as a whisper. Then it roared across the world. Catherine was expecting again. But this wasn't just another royal baby. This was hope reborn. Headlines blazed in every language. Diana lives on. Hope returns to the palace. Crowds gathered outside royal gates. Strangers embraced in the streets. Social media exploded with emotion. Hashtags soared, tears fell, and for a brief, breathtaking moment, the world felt united by something beautiful. This child, still unseen, already meant so much. To millions, she represented healing. Continuity. A quiet miracle growing in the shadow of sorrow. And when it was confirmed that the baby would carry the name Diana, the reaction was seismic. People didn't just cheer, they felt it. As if Diana herself had returned. As if the pain of the past had finally birthed something pure. Fans began to speak of this unborn girl as if they already knew her. A bridge between what was lost and what could still be. Many pictured her beside Charlotte. Two sisters, not just bound by blood, but by legacy. The strength of their mother. The spirit of their grandmother. Not just princesses of tradition, but symbols of a new generation. Not ornaments of the crown, but daughters who might one day change what it means to wear it. And through it all, Catherine remained steady. No declarations. No grand gestures. Just the unwavering strength of a woman who kept walking, even when it hurt. A woman who reminded the world, courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it just keeps going. Speculation swirled around her future. Would she carry Diana's compassion? Would she reshape royalty in her own image? Would she finally bring the monarchy closer to the people? These weren't just questions. They were hopes. Hopes for authenticity. For warmth. For the kind of humanity Diana once gave the world. and that Catherine now seemed to carry forward. But more than anything, this child became a symbol. A legacy reborn, not just in name, but in meaning. Proof that tragedy doesn't write the final chapter. That from heartbreak, something beautiful can rise. Wrapped in love, surrounded by a family that knows all too well what truly matters, she represents the best of what the monarchy could still be. Enduring, human, and deeply loved. As William and Catherine stand side by side, not just as royals, but as parents, their daughter carries more than their hearts. She carries the hope of a nation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.